Hi everyone, I'm Liz with 9 Health, and today we have a very special episode of Health Happens. I'm so excited. Today we are going live inside an Alzheimer's research lab. And joining me today is Dr. Huntington Potter, and this is his lab. And Dr. Potter, you have like 100 titles, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself to all of our viewers.
Oh, fine. It's a very great pleasure to be here. My name is Huntington Potter, and I'm the Director of Alzheimer's Research at the Anschutz campus of the University of Colorado.
All right, and so yes, like I said, today we are inside an Alzheimer's research lab. And Dr. Potter, why don't you tell us where we are starting today? What area of research are we in?
Well, this laboratory is actually a composite laboratory of the Linda Cernig Institute for Down Syndrome and the Rocky Mountain Alzheimer's Disease Center. So all of these researchers are looking at the relationship between Alzheimer's disease and Down syndrome and trying to develop new drugs for Alzheimer's disease.
Awesome. Let's take a shot over here so we can kind of see a little bit about what's going on here in the lab. And, you know, Dr. Potter, what do we know about the connection between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's?
Well, that's very, very interesting because people with Down syndrome, as you know, has 3 copies of chromosome number 21, and it turns out that they all develop the pathology of Alzheimer's disease in the brain by the time they're 30 or 40, and most of them become demented by the time they're 50 or 60. That tells us that if we study people with Down syndrome, we can get an insight into Alzheimer's disease.
And so 50 or 60, is that earlier than others who don't have Down syndrome develop Alzheimer's?
Yes, it is, much earlier. And the reason is because people with Down syndrome have an extra copy of the Alzheimer's gene, so they begin to get Alzheimer's disease early.
Got it. And so what are you hoping to learn in this lab about the connection?
These 2 students, for instance, Esteban and Nina, are working on different aspects of the relationship between Alzheimer's and Down syndrome. For instance, Esteban is interested in diabetes, which we'll talk about in a middle, and Nina is interested in Down syndrome specifically and in a discovery that we've made, which is that there are Down syndrome cells in everyone with Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, and so we didn't know that before?
No, we didn't,
Wow.
and it gives us an insight into how we might be able to develop new drugs for both Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, see, that's awesome. There's so much going on here, and as we all know, Alzheimer's affects so many of us. So, you know, if you have Alzheimer's in your family, you know, feel free to ask questions, join the conversation, let us know what you want to know about. But we're going to move on in the lab now, and we're going to move on to another area where you're doing, this is the area on research with a new drug that you're working on, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so tell us about what's going on here.
Well, one of the interesting things about Alzheimer's disease is that some people get it very easily, like people with Down syndrome, and some people almost never get it, like people with rheumatoid arthritis. This is Tim Boyd, who's been with the lab for a number of years now, and he and I discovered what we think is potentially a treatment for Alzheimer's disease based on rheumatoid arthritis. Tim, do you want to say something?
Yeah, people with rheumatoid arthritis tend to not get Alzheimer's disease, and they thought for the longest time it was the NSAIDs that they were taking, but those actually did not work very well in the trials. It actually might have caused people to even get worse that already had cognitive problems. So we thought it was the inflammation of rheumatoid arthritis that was preventing Alzheimer's disease, and we looked at those immune cells that are part of rheumatoid arthritis that can go to the brain and might prevent the disease. And so we took Alzheimer's mice, and here's a little slide. These are little mouse. That's how small a mouse brain is. But and you can maybe see that they're very tiny, and the part of the mouse brain that actually forms the cognition, called the hippocampus, that is where we injected drugs, the growth factors that make all of those immune cells. And here is kind of a good representation of what happened. We injected the drug on this side. On this side, we injected the control, and you can see all these little spots. Those are the amyloid plaques. This is an Alzheimer's mouse that we've made to have Alzheimer's disease plaques.
And the plaque is like built up on the brain, correct?
The plaques, millions build up into the brain.
They're like
and if you
little
look,
Brillo pads that accumulate in the parts of the brain involved in cognition and memory and damage neurons.
and you can see how much less there are on this side after the injection 7 days later from one injection. So then we took this drug and we took another group of Alzheimer's mice. We showed that they're impaired in our memory mazes that we can run them through, and they're compared to age-matched control mice. We split those groups in half, after showing that. And then the Alzheimer's mice that we treated for 14 days with just a subcutaneous injection performed as well or better than the regular mice.
Wow.
And even the regular mice tended to perform a little bit better.
Yeah.
And that was
That's exciting.
Very exciting. When we did another extensive test at 20 days, and then we took and looked in the brains of those mice, we'd removed over half of the plaques out of the whole brain of the animals at that point, compared to the Alzheimer's mice that were not treated.
Right. And so now you guys are in the midst of a trial.
Correct.
And so in this trial, you're giving real people the drug.
Correct, because it turns out that GM-CSF, which we gave to the mice, is already a human drug. It's called leucine. And so now we've gone into the clinic and we're treating people with real Alzheimer's disease, this drug called leucine, and looking to see whether they get helped.
So what phase are you in the trial?
We're called phase 2, which means that we're in the midst of testing whether the drug actually helps or not. And the preliminary results that we reported in London at the international meeting in July look like there is a hint of benefit.
That's awesome. That's
The main goal, though, is to make sure that it's safe given continuously, because the way it's
Right.
given now for cancer patients to rebuild their immune system after chemotherapy, it's usually only given a couple of times to rebuild their immune cells, and then afterwards it's stopped. Nobody is given it long term, and so that is what we're doing.
So that's what you're doing now. And so far you're not seeing any negative side effects, right?
No
That's
serious
really
adverse
important.
effects.
Yes, this is really exciting. I mean, like many people, Alzheimer's runs in my family, so I know I'm very interested in the research that's going on, and it makes me feel very hopeful.
Yes, we're all hopeful.
yes.
Cautiously hopeful.
Cautiously hopeful. Well, I feel like it's in good hands.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yes. All right, well, let's move on because there's more. As we know, Alzheimer's, there's more with it. And a lot of people I've seen lately in the last year in the news are referring to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So, Dr. Potter, can you tell us a little bit about that connection with Alzheimer's?
Yes. One of the problems that occurs in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease is that they don't use their blood sugar from the circulation very well. So the nerve cells look like nerve cells, but they're sort of starving. And that is very interesting because if we could help them use that fuel to think a little bit better, we might be able to have a new treatment. So Athena Wang, who will be here in a second, has been studying along with Esteban, who you saw in the first lab, to find out why people with Alzheimer's disease have type 3 diabetes and how we might be able to reverse it.
Interesting. And so what's going on in this part of the lab?
Well, over here we have a typical lab bench with a number of pipetters and a computer. And this is where we're studying the cells that come from people with Alzheimer's disease or mice with Alzheimer's disease to see whether they have the type 3 diabetes and how we might be able to prevent it.
All right. Well, there's so much going on in here. I find this very fascinating. So many different areas of Alzheimer's and connections with Alzheimer's. And I know for me, I've said it before, but it just makes me so hopeful. And it must be really exciting. You must really enjoy your job because that's going to be...
We do.
Yeah.
We do. You want to come and join us one day? You want to learn how to do research?
I don't know that you want me doing research.
Yeah, it's lots of fun. Really, we love it.
It does seem like
and
it.
we feel so, grateful to the philanthropists that have given their hard-earned dollars to help us do this kind of research.
But it must also be a lot of work. What motivates you?
Well, the motivation, of course, is to solve Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
And, of course, we have very interesting things to think about along the way.
Yeah, yes, very exciting. All right, well, thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Next week, we're going to be talking about finding your inner champion. We're going to go to the Denver Curling Club and talk about the different sports that maybe you've never done before. And no matter your age, you're never too old to try new things, and how, trying new things is very healthy for you. So we'll be at the Denver Curling Club. Hope you can join us next Tuesday at 11. We'll see you there.